On February 11th, 2023, MatPat released the first part of his Ultimate FNAF Timeline. But was it really the great class project that he claimed it was? It may have been then, in the distant year of 2023, but now looking back it kinda looks like an elementary school project instead of a high school one, and what we're looking for is some high school level stuff. I'm joking, of course, the situation isn't that dire. The Ultimate Timeline itself is comprised of 4 parts, or 3 essential eras. Foundation of Freddy's, where MatPat goes over the early timeline, the Afton era, where he discusses the crimes that William Afton committed, and Post-Purple Guy, which is essentially the modern story of FNAF. This is all fine and dandy, but while I was revisiting some of Game Theory's FNAF videos for research purposes, I stumbled across some of the most alarming mistakes I've ever seen in any theorist channel. Forget not shaving your legs or eating Christmas trees, these inaccuracies ruin their entire timeline. So let's go over those mistakes, and maybe even create our own Ultimate Timeline and fix some of the mistakes that the team over at Theorist might have made. Strap in folks, because today, I'm going to prove that the Game Theory Ultimate FNAF Timeline isn't so ultimate after all. Welcome to part 1 of my MatPat Ultimate Timeline analysis. Game Theory's Ultimate Five Nights at Freddy's Timeline is a video series on the Game Theorists channel that details the belief timeline of events in the FNAF franchise according to them. But as I stated previously, it's not the most consistent thing out there, and future videos even contradict themselves at times. This comes with theory building naturally, but still there are a number of plot holes and inaccuracies that were left in it, and especially now that we have been given more information, I feel prepared to tackle them. So the question becomes, is it actually any good? To understand if it is any good, we first need to break down what mistakes were made and the main points that MatPat brings up in this timeline of his. So let's go over the first half of MatPat's Ultimate Timeline and how he tells the story of FNAF. Essentially, his timeline starts all the way back in the 1930s, right in the middle of the Great Depression, where people are, well, they're depressed. Financially, I mean. Anyway, a young William Afton sees a real dancing bear performing on a stage in a show called Fredbear's Singin' Show. It's also possible that this show belonged to his family, but anyway, this impresses him, and he goes on to create his own mascot suit restaurant based on that bear, Fredbear's, around the 1970s. The place isn't a huge success, however, as there's a much cooler and more modern restaurant in town, Chica's Party World, opened by genius engineer Henry Emily. William is both a fan and a bit of a hater of Henry. He's obviously extremely innovative and a genius, but Afton feels it isn't fair that Henry gets all the attention for himself. Eventually, with so many people flocking to Henry's place, William's little business goes bankrupt. But guess who buys him out? That's right, his old frenemy, Henry. After that, they revive Fredbear's as Fredbear's Family Diner, mixing Afton's traditional plush suits with Henry's state-of-the-art robot tech, creating the Springlock suits, which allow for a performer mode and an animatronic mode. Everything is going great. Business is booming and William is actually happy, until everything goes wrong. At this point, William was speedrunning his engineering degree faster than Astral Spiff. He was also working on a new idea for animatronic characters who would be more fluid and interesting, a way to bring the things to life. In 1983, he created the aforementioned Springlock suits. He was so busy in those days, he decided to install a nanny cam system for his youngest son's favorite plushie, Totally Normal, to follow him, and keep an eye on him while he was at work. This child is named the Crying Child. Mike, William's eldest, was babysitting him for weeks at this point, until he decided on his brother's birthday that he would get the kid close to Fredbear and put him in the animatronic's mouth, apparently setting off Springlocks in Fredbear that had already been set off to activate the animatronic, but whatever. But anyway, this kills the Crying Child. The kid was in the hospital now, barely hanging on to life, and as he died, he heard the apologetic voice of his brother and his friends, along with his Fredbear plushie, who vowed to put him back together. After this incident, the security puppet was made, and because of the apparent Springlock failure, William and Henry retired the Springlock suits, and the Afton family was distraught. William started drinking at the local bar, Junior's. He was finally kicked out of the bar one night and killed Charlie, Henry's daughter, out of a sense of a need for revenge. The 2 high-profile deaths and grieving owners caused Fredbear's to close, leaving only its sister location, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, open. Afton started his own company, Afton Robotics, and worked on his own projects while Henry was left to grieve. William was trying to put his son back together, and while he tried to do that, he kept Michael in the nightmare experiments we see in FNAF 4 to get revenge for what he did to the Crying Child. This created a really sad life for William, and his wife left him, unable to support the family in their grief. In 1985, William decided to kill 5 kids for unknown reasons, but probably because of his thirst to kill more after Charlie. He kills those 5 kids, getting more and more violent with each kill, with the body of Cassidy, his final victim, being far more bloody and broken than the rest. Henry suspected William was behind the murders, but there was no evidence. So Henry decided to shutter William from the company and start working on new animatronics with built-in security systems, the toy animatronics. William then became a day-shift security guard for a new restaurant. William killed 5 more kids in 1987 while in the same spring Bonnie suit during his day shift. The restaurant closed after only a few short weeks of being open. The next day, a day shift guard got bit by an animatronic. Maybe it had thought the guard was William, and how were the withered animatronics moving around? William wasn't allowed at any Freddy's location, so he decided to make his own location under Afton Robotics and further his research. Circus Baby's Pizza World is open so he can capture more victims and experiment on them. Sadly, on opening day, his daughter Elizabeth was taken by Circus Baby, the lead animatronic. He was in grief, but then he realized that Baby's eyes were no longer blue. They were now a bright emerald green, the same color as Elizabeth's eyes had been. When Henry tried to reopen the Freddy's restaurant in 1993, it failed, as there was too bad of a reputation from the murders, so sadly it closed very quickly. In the meantime, William was working on the animatronic endoskeletons and trying to melt them down for remnant to inject in the fun times. He had to go back to the restaurant though because the remnant caused him to be violent and erratic. He needed to experiment more, do more research, and he needed to create more of this remnant, so he returned to the original pizzeria to find any more scrap he could use. Instead, he found the ghosts of his victims, and as they approached, William got in his trusty spring Bonnie suit that was in the back room and got spring-locked. He fought to keep living after the pain, and eventually someone found him, a security guard. Henry went to the restaurant to report the damage to the animatronics and found William. William was hoping he would be saved, but Henry left him there, drowning in his own blood, and even though he was doomed to die, he somehow kept on living. Alright, so now that we're done with the recap, let's get right into it. The first inaccuracy I want to fix in MatPat's timeline is the beginning of the Freddy's franchise. Now obviously MatPat couldn't predict the future, but Help Wanted 2 throws a very interesting wrench into his idea of the foundation of Freddy's. Fall Fest. The first time we saw Fall Fest was in FNAF Help Wanted's Curse of Dreadbear DLC, as Fall Fest 83, where it was the focus and main hub of said expansion. Fall Fest itself was a collection of shacks and huts with very strong carnival or circus imagery. It had some pretty interesting info hidden in it, but theorists didn't really dive deep into it, until now. When Help Wanted 2 came out back in December, fans were quick to point out that Fall Fest was back in a big way. Combined with the hidden message in the Code of Ruin, we came to the conclusion that the next big FNAF game would be about Fall Fest. The reason we came to this conclusion is because of the poster for Fall Fest 1970 we find in Help Wanted 2. 1970 is way earlier than any other event we've seen in the timeline thus far. The earliest confirmed date we have in the games is 1983. So what if instead of the timeline beginning with just Fredbear's Singing Show, Fredbear's Singing Show was part of a much larger traveling circus called Fall Fest? Maybe Fall Fest was the real Afton family business, not Fredbear's. As well as that, the fun times and maybe some of the toys could have been characters in Fall Fest when it was opened, as some of the design choices in the animatronics there are similar, as well as the carousel we see in Help Wanted 2, which has characters like Freddy and Toy Foxy on it. The evidence for Fredbear's Singing Show is also pretty scarce. That poster from Security Reach isn't even in Rockstar Row, and it could just be a joke or a reference to the original diner. We've never got actual proof this thing was relevant, but we do have proof that Fall Fest was. This thing is all over the new FNAF games. As well as that, the end credits music in Help Wanted 2 is called Scorched Cranberry Special. We know that Fall Fest burned to the ground thanks to the minigames in Help Wanted 2, which explains the scorched bit, and cranberries are a fruit that goes in season in fall, around October. There's way too many pointers at Fall Fest being relevant, so I think that Fall Fest being the beginning of the story is much more likely. I do like the idea of Henry having a rival location that was ripping off William's designs, but Chica's Party World isn't perfect either. The way we know Chica's exist is through a code found in Sister Location, where Chica's Party World is listed as a place one of the fun times, likely Funtime Chica, is being rented out to. We don't know if there was actually Chica's Party World so early on in the timeline. Another possible mistake made by MatPat is saying that the Crying Child never went for the FNAF 4 Nightmare experiments. This is probably straight up wrong. According to MatPat, the Nightmare experiments are only performed on Mike, not the Crying Child, but why doesn't this make much sense? Well, if you look at the evidence, the experiments have to have happened to the Crying Child first. No matter what, we have been given a lot of evidence that the Crying Child went into the experiments, just because of his fear of the animatronics. Where does this fear come from? If you look at his room in the minigames, he has toys of the animatronics in there. So why is he so scared of the animatronics specifically and not the characters? Well, it could be because he's seen these nightmarish versions of them. Every night, William had started to put the crying child into the nightmare experiments to push him away from Freddy's. You'll notice that the crying child is under extreme surveillance at all times, but only when going over to Freddy Fazbear's or Fredbear's, meaning that the crying child is being watched specifically at Freddy's locations. To counter this, MatPat uses the evidence that Mike has seen the nightmare animatronics from the FNAF survival logbook on page 41. But are we sure that it was Mike's nightmares we were seeing? This book shows us that there are spirits communicating with Mike actively, namely Crying Child and Cassidy. In the movie, which may be a different universe but should follow the same rules, when spirits are nearby, they can affect your dreams. How do we know that the nightmare animatronics aren't just dreams from a spirit's memory, say, the Crying Child? This would explain why there is a physical place that is the actual FNAF 4 bedroom in the minigames, yet the one that we see in the gameplay has so many dreamlike qualities to it. For example, the pills, the flowers, and IV that randomly appear and disappear could be other memories interfering with the current ones, Mike's memories. This again is just a theory, but it does bring up a solid point. We aren't sure who went through these nightmare experiments. We also know that these are real because of the rooms we see during the Ennard boss fight, Sister Location's secret ending. So while those might be the major points or mess-ups in parts 1 and 2, there are some smaller points I wanted to bring up that might change some of the aspects of this timeline in minor ways. The first detail I wanted to bring up is the history of the springlock suits that MatPat creates. He says that they started out as hand-sewn costumes using glitchtrap as evidence, and while this does make sense, there's one discrepancy that just doesn't make sense here, and that is the claim that the reason glitchtrap materializes as this creepy hand-sewn costume is because this is the outfit Afton used to kill the MCI kids, and he has a strong connection to it. He's essentially debunking his own train of thought here, since he talks about the springlock Spring Bonnie and completely forgets the glitchtrap one. Not only does the Fruity Maze image depicting Susie with Spring Bonnie, the Springlock suit, absolutely debunk this train of thought, it's just a really weird and random detail that isn't really relevant. If you think about it, Glitchtrap and Spring Bonnie don't look very similar at all, with the only thing unifying them being their color and their shared bunny designs. The second little detail I want to bring up is Matt's explanation for the FNAF 4 nightmares. While I've already talked about this a little bit, the last Tales from the Pizzaplex book utterly demolishes Matt's explanation that the nightmare animatronics were created using illusion discs. And honestly, that's not his fault. The book establishes that these nightmares are actually experiment chambers filled with illusion gas being orchestrated by William. This makes you wonder if more kids were put into those experiments apart from Michael and possibly the Crying Child. But who knows? In summary, while a pretty good beginning for his timeline, the first 2 episodes of MatPat's timeline are a bit outdated, but not to an extent where they become unwatchable. Yet again, I love Game Theories videos and have nothing but respect for them, and I do not condone harassing anyone over this. These are just my thoughts on the timeline and shouldn't be taken as indisputable fact. But anything more will have to wait until next time, as this is my first 2-parter since my new scriptwriter Starin decided it would probably be easier on us. Also, he's making me... what? Okay, I'm not kidding. The script literally says, speak gibberish. Okay, I'll have to figure that out with him, but in the meantime, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video as it took us a really long time to work on this, so please consider liking and subscribing. If you have any questions or comments on this video, feel free to let me know, but most importantly, remember, never stop overthinking.